Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 250. Accessible is beautiful with Edryn J. Coleman. For those of us who have been in the classroom in any subject for the last 5 years, we know things have changed. Programs are shrinking, and kids are coming to us with lost years of experience and the skills that go with it. So what do we do about it? This episode is the triumphant return of the Oxford Press Series, a collaboration with Oxford University Press and Choralosophy podcast. The idea was dreamed up years ago with Maggie Pate, who no longer works for Oxford, so there's been a little bit of a hitch in our giddy-up with this series, but now with Jeremy Edelstein over at Oxford in that position, we are getting it up and going again. So this is the official first Oxford Press episode since about a year ago when Kat Gimmon was on the show on this series. In this conversation, Dr. Coleman shares his journey as a passionate choral educator who has, quote, found his calling from God. We discuss the impact of COVID on music and general education, the importance of accessible repertoire, and what was my inspiration for wanting to do this episode, his recent session at a National ACDA, where I was singing along and bouncing along when he presented a spiral-bound solution, so to speak, to many of my repertoire problems at school. And I know this book will be the same for you. It's called Accessible but Beautiful. In the conversation, though, we emphasize the need for music that empowers students and fosters a sense of community within the choir. Edryn reflects on his teaching philosophy, the challenges faced by many students, and the collaborative effort behind creating a repertoire solution like this, which aims to provide resources that enhance the choral experience for all students, no matter what skill set they have when they come into the classroom. Central to this need is the marriage of quality repertoire with accessibility. Those of us who teach older students, middle school and high school, we know it can't just be easy. Kids feel insulted by it. Kids feel talked down to. And so this episode is an attempt to discuss the issue, but also provide a powerful solution. So tune in, stay tuned all the way to the end, and have your thinking stimulated and challenged. And then, of course, weigh in yourself with your related ideas and experiences on Facebook in the Choralosophers Facebook group or over on choralosophy.substack.com. And also don't forget to grab a reading rope for your classroom wall from the shop at choralosophy.com/shop. You can also find t-shirts and mugs and a bunch of other cool stuff there. Choir directors, music educators, show planners, you pour your heart into your music. Shouldn't your events get the same attention? That's where Ludus comes in. Sell tickets, promote your concerts, and fundraise with ease. Selling merchandise and concessions? Ludus Retail makes in-person sales effortless. Running choir camps or workshops? They have a classes feature that keeps registration simple, and when you need help, the live support team is ready to pop up with real answers from real people. The best part? It's completely free for organizations. Thousands of music programs already trust Ludus because great music deserves more than just a ticketing system. We all love to travel with our students, but we definitely don't love planning a trip. I know I've been there as the point person for details, and it is a nightmare. Forms, payments, fundraising, it's a never-ending task that takes away from doing what we love. That's where Kaleidoscope Adventures comes in. They've been planning performance trips for more than 30 years and handle all the details from start to finish. And one of the best parts about Kaleidoscope, they have crowdfunding options for every traveler. Contact Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com to find out how they can take your travel beyond expectations. I'm not sure how much, if anything, out there has not gone up in price since 2020, but I know one thing that hasn't, and that is the membership to the Patreon and to the Substack to support this show. The people who are signed up over there as paid subscribers, as my thank you to them, they can get things like t-shirts from the choralosophy.com shop. They can also get access to my Google folder of teaching materials that I've talked about on the show for over the years. And of course, they just want to help make sure that this show can continue. And one of those benefits is a shout out on the show. The producers and Inner Circle from Patreon are Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, Jonah Clicksbull, Danelle Eckert, David Kowalczyk, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. All right, everybody. I am here with Edryn Coleman, and Edryn is a person that I'm really excited to speak with for the second time total in my life because I had a chance to hang out with Edryn at ACDA recently and get to know him. But the reason that I saw him there in the first place was because I attended a session on a new book coming out called Accessible but Beautiful, which we're going to talk about for sure, but the thing that inspires me about this book is the story behind it as a music educator. And it touched my heart because it's my students too. And I think as this conversation unfolds, people are going to listen and discover, hey, these are my students too. And that's going to be an exciting part of this. So Edryn, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
This is going to be good. So first, why don't you, before we get into the project that you're doing with Oxford, why don't you tell us about you? Who is Edryn? Where do you come from? What kind of led you to do what you're doing today, and kind of describe what you're up to these days?
Who is Edryn? Edryn is a very passionate, student-centered teacher. I love teaching. It is really my calling from God. It's what I was made to do. I'm a little black boy from Alabama, grew up in church. Of course, my first musical experiences came from being in church. My very first piano teacher was the church organist at church. She was a phenomenal musician who could read anything that you put in front of her and then play all of this gospel and jazz on a Hammond organ at church. She was an amazing, learned musician. And I had very supportive parents who invested in my musicianship, from trumpet lessons to piano lessons to voice lessons. When I was in college, my mom and dad didn't miss a concert. They would travel to come and see the choir perform. I am a very, very blessed and fortunate individual who had parents who had the means to support their artistic child, because they could see the benefits of what an arts education would do. All of the years of piano lessons and trumpet lessons and voice lessons led to me getting a full scholarship to Stillman College, where my mom and dad didn't have to pay for tuition. So
Yeah.
my dad laughed that, hey, we paid it all, those 18 years of piano lessons and everything else. So they feel like they won out, and I feel like they won out too.
So it was karma.
It was karma.
That's good. And so what are you doing now? What's a day in the life of Edryn?
Oh my gosh, a day in the life of Edryn. Edryn is a high school choral director. I teach at Oakland Mills High School in Columbia, Maryland. I have 2 choir classes and 3 piano classes. I teach 2 piano 1 classes, 1 advanced piano class, and I have a 1 advanced choir and a beginning choir. I love my students. I love my school community. My colleagues are amazing. My band director, my orchestra director, my electives teacher who teaches guitar and piano and modern band jazz class. We are rocking and rolling at my school. We are all really good musicians who get along really well. I couldn't be at a better place in my career. I've been at every level, taught elementary school, taught middle school, taught college full time. Now teaching high school. The only place I haven't taught full time yet is community college. The day in life of me is just a high school teacher. I get up every day at 5:30. I go to school. I teach first period. I tell people to stop running in the hallway. I fuss at people for not remembering their music.
Yes. Yes, the universal experiences. That's
Yes.
great. That's great. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, kind of because I think it's relevant to the beginning of this conversation about this book and this project. But I saw the first time I actually saw you was at the Cincinnati convention. I didn't talk to you at that, but I was at that session where you presented with your choir. And I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying this in the wrong order, but it was before there was a book idea at that time.
It was before the book idea.
The session was related. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. The session, honestly, is the impetus to the book.
Okay.
The session itself was born really out of the conference call. The conference call, I think, if I want to remember correctly, was like a place of belonging, was what it was calling that year, the terminology, and what it
Hmm.
was asking for. And also, that was the first year that ACA was having the insight sessions at the national conference. We had done that at the Eastern Division, I think, the year before, if I'm not mistaken. But the first year, 2023, was the first year that ACDA National Conference was doing the insight session. And when the conference call came out and I read what was being asked about looking for collaboration between teachers and students and all of the different ways that ACDA was looking for community in a classroom, I read that, and it screamed off the page to me, this is who you are as a teacher, and this is your school community, and this is what happens in your classroom every day. And you have always said, as a professional, you want to be able to add to your profession. You want to be able to do these things. And if I'm being honest, I always wanted to be able to present with my choir at ACDA. I've presented at ACDA twice before doing different sessions, but I'd never presented with my choir before. And so that was another marker that I wanted to have as a professional thing in my career. And so when I read the conference call, I was like, oh, this is it, Edryn, this is it. You've got to figure out how to make this work. Strike where the iron is hot. And so I knew my school community and my circumstances in my population were exactly what was being asked for to be presented at the conference. And I wrote up the session, but the session was really based on um, the COVID effect, the after COVID coming back from COVID with my students. Everyone suffered from the whole, loss of students, the choir numbers going down, students losing all of the skills that we had placed into them before they were going away from us. In the state of Maryland where I teach, we were out of school for over a year and we were virtual. So even though we were doing all of the things on screen, the sight reading, the rhythm clapping, singing together. Well, of course, one student was singing, we were following, leader followed.
Right.
But we were trying to maintain some sense of rudiments and keeping all of the things going, trying to involve technique and skill and skill build and scaffolding and trying to just keep everything regular as we could through the medium of Zoom or Google Meet or whatever your school system used. But behind the screens, the kids were not singing with all the best technique. They weren't using the best posture. They weren't checking their do against their mi. They weren't making sure their fifth was really clean. So we
Right.
didn't know behind the screens how much they were really losing. While it was performative, we could see them doing things. My chamber choir, they had to be on screen for class. I had to be able to see them, and they knew that. So even
Hmm.
though I could see them signing, and I could see them sitting up, and I could see them making tall vowels, I didn't know what any of that sounded like behind the screen. And so when we came back,
Hmm.
I was like, that's what that sounded like behind the screen. And I was not
Yep.
very happy. And so I immediately started to say, okay, I've got to keep my choir program running. I've got to be recruiting. We've got concerts. We've got assessment. We're singing for this. We're singing for that. And we can't just pick up the same literature that we left out with. My chamber choir left out singing 5, 6 parts. We were singing Stacey Gibbs spirituals. We were singing, I was trying to give them 8-part Antonio Lotti come back,
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
sing 4 parts. They were not singing in tune. They were breathing every other note. I was like, why are we not making phrases? Why are we not all of the things that I knew these students knew how to do, and they did it well. But a year and some odd change of not doing it well or not doing it, and you lose it. And so I had to then quickly that school year just go back to the drawing board the very first day of school when we were back from COVID and revamp all of my literature, knowing I've got to find literature that my students can sing well while I am building up all of these skills again. So I'm looking
Yeah.
for music that had shorter phrases so I could teach longer phrases. I'm looking for music that had smaller rhythmic patterns so they could be quicker to remember them and learn them. So I really had to go on the hunt for finding literature. And I also, being a high school teacher and knowing my students were discerning, because they had a discerning teacher. So I couldn't put just anything in front of them and say, hey, y'all, let's sing this. They would be like, this sounds elementary. This sounds middle school. So I couldn't
Yeah.
find just anything that was 3-part or 4-part to give them. It had to really feel to them like it had the weight and the heft of the importance or what they thought the importance of the literature that we were singing previously.
Yeah.
And so that really made me do my due diligence and my good time homework, finding the right type of literature for my students. And then when the conference call came out and I read the conference call, I was like, oh, I've already done all of this. This is what I just lived. And if I lived it, I bet there are like 10,000 other teachers across the United States who've lived this too. And so I just decided, hey, I want to share this experience with my colleagues. I'm going to write it up. And I have to give credit where credit is due and just say my thank yous. One of my mentors is one of my professors, Dr. Judy Bowers from Florida State. And when I wanted to do this session, I wrote up my session. I asked her if she would read over it and just give me feedback. And her being the amazing educator that she will always be, she was more than happy to help and just give me feedback and read over it and really edit it so that it could be as good as it could be. But I wanted to make sure that I wanted my colleagues out there to know that you were not alone. You're not the only person who's feeling like, oh my goodness, I really had students who were singing at a really high level and now they're not doing that anymore. And what can I do to get them back there and not just live in this shell shock land of, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I mean, we don't have time. Concerts are coming. You better figure it out quick.
Right.
So And that's what I
Well,
had to
yeah,
do. I had to figure it out
that's
quick.
a great. I hear you, and that's a great. I think that's a great story, and there's so much that we can all kind of identify with in that. And I had a question for you that I remember thinking about at this back when I was in that session was, and this kind of relates to what the conference message was, because, and again, on this show, I almost say it every episode, but like if I say something that sounds wrong to you because it's not, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're allowed to say, no, Chris, that's not how it was. Like the one of the messages that I got out of that conference was, or sorry, out of that session was that this is the kids at my school, the type of choir that I lead. This is what I was kind of hearing you saying, wouldn't always get invited to be one of the performing choirs at a conference like this. And so and so that was profound to me because here you are at ACDA. These kids got to make this trip. They get to make this presentation in front of all these people in this conference that's built around including those kids. And the first thing I thought was, not all of my kids even make the top choir at my school because it's a big school with a big program. Like my kids are up there on that stage too. They just might not be the ones that are, maybe the stars or whatever. And how are we building our programs, even a bigger program, suburban program or whatever it is, where you got 300 kids and not every single one of your kids is going to be up on that main stage. Am I reading that right? That was part of your message?
Yeah, there has to be space for everybody. I'm at a school where I don't have students who have any type of private instruction. Any type of choral or vocal or musical or piano, they get from me. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, there are schools where there are students who, the vast majority of the kids, take vocal lessons and they can give the tone and the sound that really makes that high school choir sound so pristine and so clean. I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do have are a set of students who will give everything and work themselves to the bone to be the best that they can be. I have a set of students and a school system and a school who those students are so engaged in making a difference and making change and showing the world that they are great people, that I have students who are just willing to go the extra mile to do whatever it takes to be their best selves. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because it was interesting in particular to me because my first teaching job was in a school that is close to what you described there, where there was no private instruction. There was no kids that took piano lessons. I think actually I had one kid that took piano lessons in that school. So the background information just wasn't there. The school I teach in now is not that way. There's more support in the arts in the current school. But I remember thinking about how those kids that I taught at that first school, in a lot of ways, sometimes I hold this over my current students' heads sometimes, where I say those kids were actually quite a bit more appreciative of the music making that I do with you. Whereas you guys are so used to being good at stuff that your eyes glaze over. And I said, like, I wish that you guys could have an ounce of the passion that some of those kids at my first school had. And I don't say that to hurt their feelings. I say that to give them some perspective of not everybody has this and we can't take it for granted.
No, we
Is that
can't.
kind of is that a similar kind of like a attitude that you're
Dude,
describing in your kids?
absolutely. I stood in front of that entire audience, and the very first thing I said at that session was a thank you to everyone in there who had donated to my school. That trip cost $15,000 for bus,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hotel, all of the things. Not one child in my choir paid a dime because I
Wow.
had all of the people in the choral community, people who were in that room who were sending $50, $100. I could start calling out names. Dr. Bauer sent me money. Lisa Billingham sent me money. Dr. Thomas sent my choir money. So many people just shooting $50 here, $100 there, because I put things out. I'm like, hey, people, my kids can't afford this. Like,
Yeah.
we really want to go be represented, and my school system did give us some financial assistance as much as they could. It's a school system; they can't just give it all to one school. But we were supported financially from my school system. But the vast majority, like 75% of the funds, came from people who invested in my students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What kind of time did they have? Like, did they enjoy it? Was it like a
Oh,
big, exciting thing for them?
dude. The funny thing about so we did two sessions, right? And as we're moving through the hallway, people are telling them what a great job they did and how they were awesome kids and such a blah 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 blah. We get back to school and I'm like, hey guys, so let's debrief. Tell me about your AC experience. Tell me what you think the best part of your trip was. Without them breaking anything. They were all like, Jason McFerdinand Singer's concert. I'm like, you don't even think they could care less about what they I'm like, we did 2 sessions full of teachers. You all did really well. All these applause. They could care less about their own work. They were so enthralled and so appreciative, and I'm glad they got to see it too. They
Yeah,
got
oh,
to
for
see
sure.
the yeah. So when I asked them, I said, "Well, tell me more." And I said, "What was great about it?" One of my altos, she said, "Just the way they came on stage. It was refreshing." I was like, wow. They were so blown away by that concert. And it made me reflect and be so proud that my students could be so thankful for someone else's art and not even think about themselves, but be so appreciative of good art and good work and good singing that was the most, to them, that was the most impactful thing. The great choir that they heard, not the work that they did. Because they could easily walk away saying, we feel so empowered, we did so good, and they did, but that's not what any of them said, which really made me, my first instinct was, you all need to think about what you did. Selfish me. Not the kids.
Hmm.
They were so much more in tune to the experience. And
Yeah.
they were just so appreciative of that concert. They were more happy to have been there and been at that concert than them doing their presentations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more. And then the work we do in the classroom can be customized to what they need in the music and the repertoire they're learning, and it can be customized to their current learning level as a group. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. Yeah, that's really great. And I do have one more question about that session because it is, again, I have method for my madness here, trying to lead us into this conversation about the current project. But I remember another thing that I found interesting about your group, because it's different. This is where it's a different thing than where I teach, is like there
Mhm.
are no, in my choir, and if it's like my advanced choir, there are no beginners in there. They have to take my beginning level class. There's no freshmen, so I have the luxury of being able to build them up from where it's just a mandatory thing. I don't care how good you are, freshman. We've got more tenors and basses that are older than you, so they're going to be in the upper level group. And I noticed that one of the things that you were kind of presenting on was, so I've got kids who have just joined choir, and I've got kids that have been in choir for a while. And how do I choose repertoire that doesn't bore some of them that have done this before, but is also accessible enough for the kid who just walked in the door? And that really resonated with me because I do have non-advanced choirs too. And so then I'm thinking, all right, so now I've got this way to approach this repertoire selection for more than just my kids that have been 3 years in choir already, that kind of thing. And so tell us about how that played into your thought process when you were putting together that repertoire.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was when we were coming back from COVID. We were coming back full time in school, and if I'm being honest, I had some students who were not coming back to choir because I had some parents who were fearful about their child, their son or daughter, being in a choral class, and so my numbers went really way down. And so I decided to that year let ninth graders audition for my top group because
Yeah,
I needed students who were of high caliber who could do, who had some type of, who started from somewhere that I could take them, to the next level.
sure.
Because I have
Yeah.
a concert choir at my school, which is I affectionately call them my y'all come sing. You don't have to audition. If you see me in the hallway and you say, hey, Dr. Coleman, I want to sing, join concert choir, come on, fifth period, I got you. Okay, no audition, no nothing. And I love those kids, and I'm always able to find kids in that class who are really ready to go to the chamber choir class. But I digress. So
Yeah. No,
because the
that makes
numbers,
sense.
yeah, because the numbers were low that year, I opened my auditions up to ninth graders, and I had a few who were just like they had experience singing in church, they had I had three of them that year, three ninth graders. They could support their sound. They understood making a sound. They had good ears. And so there was a lot of bones there for me to work with. And so because I said, you know what, I need good voices and there's some bones to work with. I can work with this. I can build this up. And I mean, that's just what you have to do. I don't have anybody else to help me teach them parts or teach them how to sight read. I do it all. And so just stay after school some days. You have sectional
Yep.
some days.
Now, how did having those beginners in there impact your repertoire selection for that, or did it?
It really didn't, if I'm being honest, because I shared with them that I wanted them to be able to step up.
You're right.
And
Okay.
so I had kids who were ready to meet the challenge, but the music was not so difficult that they couldn't get there, obviously. But I tried to make, like I said, but what I did, I couldn't make it too easy that the kids who could read anything would just be bored out of their minds. So it was a curated search of music that had rhythmic fills, word patterns, messages like Stardust, like Brittany Boykins' Stardust. The message to that song really resonated with my students. And it is also, I feel, somewhat accessible. It might on the harder side of accessible in the middle section. But Dr. Boykins' Music of Life, very accessible. Something else that my students loved. They loved the text. So it was things like I had to find text that they could connect with. I had to find things that I knew they felt they could groove to. Yeah, and all of those things played a big role in my selection. Funny story, one of the pieces that we did, well, the one song that we sang by ourselves in that session, because we did like a part reading where the choir sang some, you were there.
Hmm.
But you know, the one song we sang by ourselves was "The Word Was God" by Dr. Powell.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's not a viral piece right now or anything
No,
at all.
I'm gonna let that hang out there. Uh huh.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. So what I was thinking about too is like with that, and this is also part of this book that you guys have just put out at Oxford called "Accessible but Beautiful," is that the other trick with this? Yeah. Oh yes, we have that, and we will definitely put a link in the show notes for sure to getting that. But what I think is really cool is that by the time kids get to high school, um, there is, especially if they are truly beginners, and I get a
Hmm.
lot. Most of my ninth graders, I would say, are beginners
Hmm.
in the sense that they sang in choir maybe a half a year in eighth grade at most, and so that means they didn't get a lot of kind of fundamentals in music, like in the kind of music learning theory kind of a way where you've got to build an auditory map in their head of what music is. If they've never taken piano, they've never done any of that stuff, they are truly beginners. But at the same time, you can't take them back to elementary school music and build all those things because they will feel so insulted that you're doing little kid things with them that they'll just quit. So there has to be like a way to find repertoire, and this is one of my most common questions that listeners to this show ask me, because I do a lot of like, how do you teach literacy to the beginner? But then people will say, but if I start at that, if I really truly start at square one, kids are going to be so bored. And usually my answer is, well, you have to work really hard to find the repertoire that threads the needle for that,
Yeah.
where it sounds like it's really hard, but it's not, that kind of stuff. And then here comes your session at the most recent ACDA, where you did a reading session with Accessible but Beautiful, and I was sitting there the whole time. I remember afterwards you commented to me that I looked so into it when I was singing along. I was singing along because I was into it because I oh my god, my beginner kids would love this song. And then we turn the page and I'm like, oh my god, they would love this song too. Oh my! And then we turn the page. I was just so excited, not because it's like my favorite type of music to sing because I'm more advanced, but I was thinking of my kids being student centered. They would love this. So talk to us about this project a little bit more. Where does it, you said already that it came from this session, at least the idea did.
Hmm.
And then it grew into something more formal, an actual book that you can buy, like this awesome collection of music. Fill in the gap. What happened in between?
Wow. Okay, so after it literally happened at ACDA, were the beginning fruits of this. Everybody knows Marcus is my bestie, and he had done his book
Marcus
with
Garrett.
Oxford,
Yep,
Dr. Marcus L.A.
that's
Garrett.
right. That's right.
For all the people out there, yeah, that's my bestie. His book had just come out. He did a session on his book at that conference as well. The anthology of Black Choral composers. I think I said that right. And I so happened to be staying in the same hotel as Robin Elkton, who is one of the managing the editors at Oxford, and she and I kind of bumped into each other in the hallway. And we had met previously, and she was in my session, and we talked about it. And she shared with me that Oxford had been looking to get into the American music market more, and they understood that music education would be probably a very strong foothold for them to get into the American music market. And she
Mm-hmm.
shared with me that she had been in my session and that she thought that my topic would be a very good way for Oxford and for them to get into the American music market. And so we talked further, and Marcus had done his book previously. And if I'm being honest, they were like, hey, you guys are best friends. You all work really well together. What do you think about collaborating on a new book with this, bringing some of what Marcus did in his first book, and Edryn, you bringing your research and your stuff into a book, and you all melding it together where it becomes a teaching guide, a manual with repertoire and lesson plans that help someone navigate how to teach the piece. And we were ecstatic about it. And it literally, we started writing this thing probably a month after ACDA, literally we started probably a month after. And it took
Mm-hmm.
us a year and a half, to do the entire book. Us getting pieces from other composers. Every piece, that came in the books, and I had to sit. Marcus and I both sat with each piece, and we looked at it for range and all of the things that we decided what would be accessibility, things that may be too outside of the bounds that become advanced. So if it went to this note for the soprano section, oh, that's a little bit too high for that's out of the accessible range. That's more for an advanced choir. Or if it went too low, or if the tenor part went too high, or if the rhythms got too complicated, things like that, or if the accompaniment got too confusing for the voices, all these things we would scan. Actually, he and I would just be on the phone or on FaceTime sometimes and just looking at a piece of music and talking it through, or sitting at our pianos and playing it through. And we did that with almost every piece. And then we decide whether or not the piece was good for the book. Then he would go on further and do more in-depth editing of those pieces that had to be edited to make sure they fit. Then I would go off and then look at each piece and start writing all the lesson plans for the piece, kind of guides for teachers. And so then we come back and look at each other's work, and we do that. And that was pretty much how we worked for about a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, just back
Yeah.
and forth.
And I apologize if I missed this detail in that narrative, because I'm listening, of course, in real time, like the audience is. But did you seek out every single piece for consideration on your own, or did anyone submit things? Like,
No,
was this
Marcus and I
all just
reached out
a
to Marcus and I asked every person who is in the book. Either we asked, well, yeah, we asked him. We had some friends who had some things that we had seen before that they had not published, and we're like, oh, somebody wrote this, and she sent it to me, and this would be great for the book. And he's like, oh, you remember so and so wrote this, and so we had some things that we knew some friends had written before. We knew some things that some people were wanting to revoice and other voicings, and so, but every piece in the book is something that Marcus and I reached out to those people and asked if they would add to. There was no one who was like, "Hey, I got this piece. Will you add it to the book?" None of that.
I see.
Everyone, yeah, yeah.
And was there ever like in the project being that it's designed specifically for kind of starter choirs, so to speak, beginner choirs or younger choirs, or
hmm
maybe choirs that have less access to
Community
the
choirs, church choirs, not just younger.
Yep. Yeah. Did you ever have to, with any of the pieces as you're editing them, did you ever have to say to the composer, like, ooh, actually, this might be too hard?
Yes, yeah. There
Can
were
you give an
times where
example?
we.
Like,
Well, I won't say the name of any of the pieces.
that's okay.
I won't do that. But I can
Yep.
say like for what I shared in earlier, if we felt like the range was too high for the tenor,
I see.
and that was especially one of the big things. Looking at the tenor ranges, if I'm being very honest, as a high school choral director, that's one of the first things I looked at in everybody's piece. If it was an
Yeah.
SATB voicing, the first thing I looked at was where's the tenor range go, because
Hmm.
I listened to one of the podcasts you did with Reagan, and you're talking about lessening boys in choir, and so
Hmm.
that's one of the things I think about is the number of boys in choir and the number of real tenors in your choir, not the baritones that you have sing the E flats, but the boys who are real tenors, and how high is this line, and how can they sustain it over time if it's too high to be sustained for a 10th grade tenor, for an 11th grade tenor
Yep.
who's is his first year in choir. And yeah, he can float up there for a little bit, but he ain't learned how to stay up there for a whole 4 minutes of a piece. So yeah, those type of things is what we really looked at.
I see. So it wasn't like, I'm assuming all kind of had an understanding of the type of student that they were
Yeah,
aiming for,
yeah,
or was
yeah.
that really your job to guide them on that?
No, I won't say we guided anyone. I mean, we there were parameters that we shared. Hey, this is what the book
Hmm.
is aiming for, and we like your piece. And the conversation went back and forth. There was no pushback from any composer if we were like, hey, this is a little bit too high. Can you think about revoicing this? And then further, Marcus would then look at some things and say, hey, if you change the alto here to this and change the tenor to that, then maybe that would work better than this, because he's just brilliant at that. And so between all of us working collaboratively, yeah, no one, not one composer had an issue if Marcus and I asked them to revoice something or to lower a line or to go back and look at a chord again, or not a single person. They were more than happy to do it. Everyone was so easy to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about with this book, and I was thinking about, or when I saw the presentation, was that why doesn't more of this type of repertoire already exist? Because like how much of our bread is buttered, so to speak, by the beginning, middle school, and high school choir kid. Our jobs don't exist without that. And of course,
You
I
have
have
to
my
build the
theory.
choir first.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. I mean, I have my theories about why composers don't write more of this type of music, partly because the composer tends to be already more advanced, and so they don't want to limit themselves, so to speak, to saying like, well, if I want to write 16th note triplets, then I should write 16th note triplets, and why should I hold myself back? And I get that as an artist, but at the same time, then we have this gap in the repertoire, and I imagine that you saw this gap too, or else why make this book?
I saw
Thoughts?
the gap, and I challenged those of us who are really good musicians, who write, who understand theory. It is, and I said this in the session, it is harder to write in this style than it is to use all of my theory tools and just go to town and write this amazing thing that has all of these amazing figures and these beautiful chords and for 8-part voice. Yes, we can spill that out because that's who we are. We're that advanced. But it
Hmm.
takes a lot of work and a lot of skill to sit there and write a piece that is accessible, that puts you in a box. It makes you have to really bring your level of musicianship to a certain place.
Yeah. 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 And I think too, it plays into, and I want to know your thoughts on this, because I think it also plays into our choir director desire to push our kids to greater heights because it reflects well on us. And
Yeah.
so then we tend to overprogram. And I
Yeah.
think these two things work together to create this gap.
I totally agree. I feel that in my bones. And I was that teacher in my younger part of my career who wanted to do all the hard stuff because my kids could. You know, I was a
Hmm.
kid. I am known in my state. When I was teaching middle school, I had more kids make all state than any other school in the state. I had one year I had 16, the next year I had 17. People were calling me like, oh my God, how do you have so many kids make all state? Because I was so that teacher. I was so
Hmm.
everything, all the hard music. All my kids got to make all state. We got to get straight ones. I got to show how worthy we are. I am not that person anymore. That was in the first part of my teaching. Now I understand that the student's worth is them. It's not we got here and see how much we've done. It's do you feel like we've achieved this? If you feel
Yeah.
like we've done it and you honestly can tell me that you're doing your best, then I am so happy with that. If you are giving me your 100% best, or you giving me the best you have to give, because I tell my students sometimes 100% is just not it. Sometimes you're sick. Sometimes 90% is the best you got to give. But if you're giving me the best you got to give that day, then there's nothing you have to apologize for.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, like I said, I kind of went through a similar, um, I guess, transformation over the 20 plus years I've been teaching, where I
Hmm.
was definitely more, I mean, looking back on it, I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to prove my own worth and use my students to do that. And I think that's where it comes from for a lot of us. But I'm interested if you are able to pinpoint anything in your kind of life or teaching story that helped you make that evolution, because I do see it as an evolution that we kind of all have to go through.
It's an evolution, but my journey is different than yours, Chris, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Mine was from a reflection of I've always taught at minority schools. I've always been in majority
Mm-hmm.
black schools. And so my rationale was because I knew that there were people who had a mindset of what my students could and could not do. And so it was from we will go and get straight ones. We will have more kids make all state. We will be the choir that sings at the state conferences. And I was, and we were. But it was from a place of we have to prove, and it was not a we, it was a more of a me. I have to prove that black people are worthy to be in these spaces. And I have all
Mm,
these black kids, and we're going to show you that we're worthy to be in these spaces. And I did. And it was more about me. And I don't have to be that person anymore. I don't feel like I have to prove because I'm black that I deserve to be in these spaces. I think my work speaks for itself. So yeah, my impetus for wanting my little black kids to be the best things ever was because they were little black kids. And I didn't want
right.
people to make assumptions about their ability level because they were little black kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very important distinction for sure. And
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. And especially in a majority black school, because it totally makes sense to me that you would look at that as almost like a mission beyond just the music is that
Yeah.
we're going to represent us.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I imagine I don't get the impression that you no longer care about that perception of what black kids can do, but you've just manifested it differently in your teaching career now than you did before. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely have the same sense of passion and care, but there is a different manifestation of how that comes across and how we perpetuate that and make that known. Because I still teach in a majority minority school. My school is probably 40% black, maybe
Okay.
45, maybe 35% white, and actually no, probably more Hispanic and lesser percent white. Probably
Mm-hmm.
black, Hispanic, and then white, and then Asian. But majority black. My school's majority black, second Hispanic, and then white.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then, it's interesting because people who've listened to the show for a long time here will know kind of some of my story, but you are newer to me. And so my kind of the short version of that evolution for me is that when I'm in a school where I started teaching 20 years ago. It's also the school that I went to when I was a kid. And it was entirely white, almost entirely white when I was a kid. And even when I started there, but the town has changed a
Hmm.
lot, and so the makeup of my choir is now almost exactly as diverse as the country. So we're about 60% white, whereas it was 95, 96% when I was a kid, because it's Midwest. And so of course Midwest and suburban, and so you're as the city expands, of course that's a totally different podcast on how people populations move. But it's been fascinating to see how even though the story you told about your early teaching career and how you wanted to present those kids, even as a white guy, I also felt, and admittedly differently than you, obviously, because my perspective is different, but I also felt a little bit of that, like, I don't want these kids that are coming in my district. In a lot of ways, it's families that are moving out of the city into the suburbs that
Hmm.
are non-white students, and I don't want anyone to think those limiting things about them either.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna make, you're here, you are now welcome here, you are gonna learn all the same stuff that all the other kids are gonna learn, and you're gonna excel, and you're going to be also in all state, and you're going to, like, do all these things. But of course I'm going to come at it motivated differently, but it's ultimately like all these issues of kind of racial issues and racial and ethnic equality, they impact us all, they just impact us in different ways.
Hmm.
Thoughts about that?
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. I think I can't say anything better than what you just said. I agree with that 100%. We all deal with them, and they impact us in different ways. And as we grow and as we get older, I always say growing things change and changing things grow. As we get older and we change and experiences change us, we don't leave some of our mindsets. We just evolve with them. And so this mindset for me has evolved where I don't feel, like I said before, I don't feel the need to have that feeling of we've got to be the best, like to really
Hmm.
push that out, or feel like we have to make a mark or we have to prove someone wrong. I don't
Yeah.
feel those things anymore. Doing your best is enough.
Almost like I hear you saying, instead of having a chip on one's shoulder, we're just going to have a quiet confidence. We're here because we belong. I don't need to prove it to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. And those kids, I'm sure, benefit from it, from having you as their teacher. That's awesome.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, of course. And okay, so question now back to, because I'm going to steer us in one final direction back towards the book. I'm
Yeah.
assuming, because you know the guy who made the book, that some of your kids have gotten to sing some of these songs already. Am I? Is that a?
Yes,
Is that a? Have they?
that is a
So
fair assessment.
Okay. Yep. I'm assuming maybe even before the book was published, but I won't tell anyone. Don't worry. But do they have they had any favorites? Are there any kind of songs that you want to shout out specifically without obviously listing the whole thing? Or are there things that your kids have done that they really enjoyed? Like, what are some things we should look for in there?
So, shameless plug, the very first piece my kids did from the book was my piece.
Okay.
They wanted to do that first. That was them. I'm very honored that they wanted that, but I was going to program it anyway. But I'm glad that they wanted it. So they loved my piece. We also my arrangement of Lift Every Voice. They fell in love. We did Weaving by Kahan Terraporvella. We did that for our assessment this year, even though it wasn't in print yet.
Okay.
I had it. But they absolutely loved his piece. If I'm thinking of pieces in the book, After the Rain by Sarah Cordell, I did the SSA arrangement with my advanced women's chorus a few years ago, and they love that. And so then we have the SAB arrangement in the book. I think everyone is going to love that arrangement. Favaza has Reconciliation. Love it. Ruben Burroughs has A Hashke Venu. The language and the piano to that. I was actually practicing that today in my office because I'm going to do it next year in the fall with my students. Shout out to Ruben. And also, Marcus and I are doing a thing at Carnegie Hall next year. We're doing a national concert. So I'm going to do Ruben's Hashke Venu there. We're doing a joint concert. He and I are going to share choir. He'll do 3 pieces. I'll do 3 pieces with the people who come to New York to sing in the Nationals Concert Choir. I
Mm-hmm.
love that piece. It is absolutely gorgeous. Ruben did an amazing job with that piece. Of course, Marcus's "Sing Out My Soul" is in our book, but everybody knows it's a banger. My kids call it a choral banger.
Yes, that's good. They're up with the lingo.
Yeah, "Sing Out My Soul" is a choral banger. But yeah,
I learned.
of course, Dr. Boykin's Music of Life is in the book. Temporal, Diana Saez. Everybody loves that piece. Deanna did a great job with that piece. I could go through and talk about so much music. Shelton loves A Far Country. I had so much fun sitting down, being able to play through people's music, and I felt like a spy, like I was like in a spy movie, like I had firsthand knowledge to all of this music that other people had not seen or heard. It was so cool. I was like, and if I'm being honest, I'm like, oh, I get to do these pieces. I'm gonna do this piece before anybody else gets to do it because nobody even knows it exists yet. And I'm sitting here playing it, and it is amazing. I'm like sitting here like geeking out at this amazing music that nobody else gets to hear just yet. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking to myself, I can't wait till my friends hear this. They're gonna lose their mind when they hear this piece, or they're gonna want this so bad. Yeah, I was geeking out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I can understand. That's the privilege of being the editor. You get
Yeah,
to see behind the curtain. That's
yeah.
awesome. And by the way, just for the benefit of you and the audience, just so you probably would never make this mistake, but we can call it a choral banger. But apparently, I learned the hard way in front of an entire audience in a Catholic church. You do not call a song a bop. That you're no longer allowed to call a song a bop because apparently that's got some kind of new meaning about sexual something online with the kids. So I'm standing in front of an entire audience, like 500 people in a Catholic church, and I've got like 80 kids behind me. And I turn to the audience and I talk about how we're going to finish this song, the concert with this song. Oh, and the kids love this song. It's such a bop. And I hear behind me and I turn around. I was like, what? And they were like, Mr. Muntz, you can't say that. And I was like, all right, oh my God, what is this? The slang is changing too fast. I can't keep track of this. And they explained it to me afterwards. Apparently, it's like a woman who's promiscuous or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had
And I was
no
like,
clue.
as of when? Because like 2 years ago, that meant like a song that
A
just
good
has like
thing, right?
a catchy beat or whatever.
Can I tell you something I do? And this is to all of my colleagues out there who do honor choirs or any guest conducting. I
Uh huh.
teach high school. And every time I get ready to go do a thing with some other schools, I tell my kids to tell me what I should be saying and what I shouldn't be saying. What's the up terminology and not, so I don't be looking stupid in front of somebody else's high school kids. And they laugh and they tell me things not to say and what to say.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea. That is awesome. My personality with my kids related to slang is that I try to say all of the slang just because they hate it when I say it. Don't worry, I try to sound as suburban and white as possible when I say it because then the cringe factor just for them is like even worse, and I love it. Like it gives me power. Like they cringe and I'm like, ha 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 ha. I just love it. But it is hard to keep up with, to be honest. It's like
It
it's changing
is.
so fast.
It is. It is. And I really try. And I try to be kind of hype and hip but yeah, I can't keep up with all of it either.
All right, Edryn, this is so much fun. I appreciate you spending time with me. Before we sign off, how do we get the book? And what are things that we need to know about accessing the songs in the book?
Sure. The book is on all of the major websites. It's on JW Pepper. Shout out to Pepper. It is obviously on the Oxford website. I tell everybody the spiral bound is only $5 more than the hardcover. Get the spiral bound. I don't like my pages, my covers bent. Those of us who like books. So get the spiral bound. The book itself, I'm really proud of it because as a teacher, I know that any teacher in a classroom can open up the first page of that book and it tells them all the places they can start. It says, hey, measure 19 is a good place to start where you can have everybody sing in unison. Or measure 34 is a good place where everybody has the same rhythm. Start here,
Mm-hmm.
getting them all clapping this rhythm. And also, I've even written warm-ups for everyone. So in the book, there are vocal warm-ups that go along with everything. I wrote them all in the key of C because every choir director ain't a good pianist. I can play. I play well, but everybody's not a good pianist. And some people get daunted when they see a bunch of sharps or a bunch of flats. Well, if you can start your warm up in the key of C and then work yourself up in half steps, I think people are more comfortable doing that. So I wrote every warm up in the key of C, and the warm up kind of mimics parts of the piece, either some rhythmic variation or melodic variation that may be difficult for the students will hear in the piece. So it just kind of helps reinforce those hard parts of the piece. So I'm really proud of the lesson plans because I think they are really, really good guides to help teachers teach quicker and make more use of their teaching time in class because they can just go right to these spots and start teaching.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had forgotten to ask about that. I remember being struck by those warm ups and lesson plans built right into the book. What about, and I'm going to ask this for the benefit of the audience too, but also because I'm just ignorant about how it works. But like, let's say you got this big old thick book and you want to do a song and you want to do it with 40 singers. Do you need 40 of the books? And how do you keep it from, like, what is do they sell them individually? Like, how's that going to work?
The books are sold individually, and you can buy the pieces individually as well. So you don't need 40 copies of the book if you want to do one piece. All of the pieces at some point will be able to be purchased separately through online services. Like my piece right now is on Sheet Music Plus, so you can purchase that. Hoshkevenu too. I think a lot of the pieces right now are on Sheet Music Plus, so you don't have to buy the book itself. Of course, we want you to buy the book, but if you want to do one piece, you can purchase some of the pieces separately right now.
Right. So maybe the move for the most teachers that have budget concerns where they're not going to buy a classroom set of 40 books, but they're gonna buy one for themselves so that they have access to all those songs, and then they're going to go start to hunt those individual songs. I'm just guessing that's how most people would be able to
Yeah, yeah.
access a book.
Unless you can have a magic fairy get you a classroom set.
Absolutely. Yes. I am not trying to discourage anyone from getting their classroom set. If you've got the budget, you should do it. Cause this is a worthy project for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm excited. At the time I had seen the session and gone to ACDA, I'd kind of all the repertoire for this school year was already planned and set, but immediately started making plans for next year. And so I'm going to be doing several pieces with our beginning groups out of there and hopefully using several opportunities to help build those skills in ways that the kids feel like, hey, I'm singing real choral music, but also they can access it with their current level of skill. And I'll let you have the last word on why that's important.
Well, you want your singers to feel empowered. I tell my students I would look really dumb if I was standing in the auditorium waving my arms and no one was on the stage. I have to retain people in my choir. I have to make them feel seen. I have to make them feel like they have advanced. I have to make them feel like they are part of a community. I have to make them feel like they have achieved something. No one wants to be a part of a losing team. No one wants to be a part of something that they don't feel empowered or pushed by. And so I had to have music that made my students feel like, hey, we are doing big things. We are singing well. We are bringing the audience to applause by our musical abilities, and we don't feel like it is trite. That's the biggest thing. These students can feel in the sounds. They're just, and I hate to sound so, I don't mean to be so just total blanket covering, But there are some pieces where it sounds immature. It doesn't sound
Yeah.
mature enough for a high school choir. And they hear that in the accompaniment and in the vocal lines, and they're like, they'll say, that sounds kiddie, that sounds baby. And so you have to find those pieces that make them feel empowered and not feel less than or immature. But
Or
the
talk
whole
down
point of
to.
all of it, yeah, talk down to, absolutely. But the whole
Yep.
point of it is retention. If you want your choir to grow, today you're singing in my concert choir and you're singing, these pieces that are accessible. But tomorrow you may be in my chamber choir and we can do a little bit more because you've learned those skills through this music that only helps feed into my larger choir because now
Yeah.
I'm training you through not only am I training you and giving you all of the technique you need, but you're getting it through music that you're falling in love with.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so well said, and that is the goal. And I think everybody should go get it. And it's going to be an exciting resource for the community. So thank you for putting it together, and thank you for spending an hour with me.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
All right, bye. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.